Ever wonder what it feels like to focus deeply on something very small? Good day. Welcome back to the studio. Today I'm diving into a really fun and focused technique, painting miniatures with a palette knife and small brushes. Ever wonder what it feels like to focus deeply on something very small? Now, today isn't just about painting any tiny scene or object. It's about shifting our attention from image itself to shapes, textures, and rhythms that build the work. And along the way, I'll share how this kind of focused, small-scale painting practice can teach you something powerful, a powerful lesson about leadership, whether in business, teams, or even leading ourselves, the most important part of leadership. Now, palette knives are such a unique tool. They are blunt, unpredictable, and kind of wild compared to brushes. When you paint small with a palette knife, you quickly realize that precision isn't the goal. Instead, it's about observing and trusting the shapes that emerge. At this scale, the way you place a single shape or edge matters more than the literal image you might want to create. And that's a powerful shift in mindset. Now ask yourself, how comfortable are you with letting go of control in your creative or work process? I love painting miniatures because it forces me to slow down and be deliberate. Each mark has weight and the composition develops shape by shape, no rushing. It's almost like a visual meditation. Now, do you recall a time when you focused too much on the perfect outcome instead of the process? What shifted when you let go? This is similar to good leadership, especially in fast-paced environments where we can easily get lost in big picture chaos. Leadership requires slowing down to notice the small shapes, the micro decisions, subtle shifts in team energy, the little signals that reveal the bigger picture. When I worked in these tiny pieces, I'm not trying to create detail, realistic scenes. Instead, I'm focusing on balance, contrast, and movement, the relationship between shapes. It's abstract, but it feels very alive. This reminds me of how effective leaders operate. They don't micromanage every detail. Instead, they read the shapes, the patterns, and dynamics that shape outcomes. They trust intuition over control. Think of a time when small, subtle actions changed the course of a project or relationship. How did that feel? Now, here's a little story. Early in my career, I worked in environments where leadership was all about control and perfection. Get everything exactly right. But that approach created stress, rigidity, and it missed opportunities. It wasn't until I embraced the messy, unpredictable parts of art, like painting with a palette knife, that I started to understand what true leadership feels like. True leadership is about trust and adaptation. It's about knowing when to step in and when to let shapes evolve in on their own. What shapes do you notice inside yourself? Thoughts, feelings, and habits that need gentle shaping or acceptance. In miniature painting, every shape you add changes the whole piece's energy. You can't ignore the small strokes because they influence the entire composition. Similarly, in leadership, small actions, a word of encouragement, a quick check-in, or an intentional pause shape the culture and direction more than big dramatic moves. Now, the palette knife also teaches us to be comfortable with imperfection and with surprises. Sometimes a stroke doesn't go as planned. It scrapes or smudges, and you have to decide, do I work with it, change direction, or embrace the unexpected? This is a metaphor for leadership. You can't control every outcome. What matters is how you respond. The best leaders turn challenges into new possibilities, much like turning a mistake into a new shape on the canvas. Now, painting small with a palette knife isn't just a creative exercise. It's a way to train your eye and your mind to see clearly, focus deeply, and adapt fluidly. Those skills translate directly to self-leadership. Being your own leader means paying attention to your internal shapes, your thoughts, your feelings, and energy, and shaping them with intention, not focus. It's learning to trust yourself, to adapt, and to move forward even when things feel unclear or imperfect. So, if you're a leader in business, in a team, or simply leading yourself, I encourage you to try painting small with a palette knife. Focus less on the image and more on the shapes and movement. It's a way to build patience, observation, and trust in the process. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to expand further on this idea and how you think art can shape your leadership. So bear in mind that no matter what you are painting, no matter the subject, no matter the size, no matter the composition that you're creating, focusing on shapes and deliberate markings with the palette knife is where you will start to see your own success coming through. If you will continue to second guess your marks, you'll continue to have that energy imbued within your artwork. Now, it's fairly normal to do have uh, second guessing thoughts and doubts, and all these resistances rise within you when you are painting. The aim of this process is to A, be aware, and B, choose a new direction when you are aware of those limiting thoughts and limiting patterns that arise when you paint. So making those deliberate marks is really the key. And as I mentioned, miniature painting forces you to really look at what's important and to really make a deliberate decision with an intentional focus. Otherwise, you'll end up having a miniature artwork that's overworked, too busy, and not enough energy and too much movement in a sense. So let me just show you a couple of ideologies behind deliberate marks when you paint with a palette knife. So here's our canvas, and now let me just pick up a nice dab of paint. And there it is there, a nice dab of salmon pink. What a shape or what it looks like when you make a deliberate mark versus a doubtful mark is something akin to this. So if I was to paint any shape, and it does not matter what particular subject I'm painting, a deliberate mark would be something like this. You put your palette knife to your canvas and it's a nice stroke. If you were to have a doubtful or a second guessing mark, you'd most likely be something like, you'd be second guessing. So your palette knife is shaking. You're not really sure. Is it there? Is it here? Is this the right one? And then you finally commit to some kind of contact between your knife and your canvas. And then it ends up looking like, oh, well, that's like this. And you end up doing that. So deliberate marks for your composition is very, very important. Now, if I was to go over my very confident mark up here with another color, because now I wanted to paint wet into wet and I wanted to blend the colors or the tones directly on my canvas. Again, a deliberate movement would be something like this, and you'd move your knife back and front, shaping every direction of your whatever you're painting or your composition. I might go back and pick up the lighter one again, and just to incorporate a bit more of that lighter tone. And again, I drag it across and move it quite confidently and comfortably. If I was to now incorporate a darker tone over this light one here, which is my doubtful, I'm not certain what I'm doing point of view, your painting will look something like this. And I call it the stabbing move, because everyone keeps wanting to just do that and basically just almost like tap dance on top of your canvas. And whilst that's an effect in its own way, if you were to do that confidently, what you haven't done is been able to blend both tonal values and create soft edges in the shape that you're painting. So again, if I was to now, I'll just grab a bit more white so we can see a clear delineation between the tones. So if I was to now grab a lighter tone and again use this as my doubtful, very scared process of painting, it would look like this. I'm not sure, maybe there, maybe there. So again, confidence in having a direct, very powerful move without fearing or trusting your process is important. Again, if I was to go with another tone on top and glide that across, move that tone to create soft edges, bring it back down again. this part up here is not well blended, and I kind of like that accident, but I want to make sure that this line is a lot more smoother and it creates a lot more softer edge. This is a technique of really painting wet into wet, but again, it's having that deliberate motion, letting the knife do most of the work, and you're really utilizing your hand as an extension of the knife, not necessarily your hand being separate. So again, let your knife do the work, move the paint from side to side, and create these softer tones. And let me just bring the camera closer so you can see the difference in tonal value. Okay, so we can see here a very clear differentiation between the top color note and the bottom color note. And notice the soft edges around the two blending of these two colors and two values. That's important. I mean, with every artwork that you do, you want to focus on soft and hard edges. But it's this point here that you want to create and focus on whenever you're painting any subject. So you've given the viewer an interest between a hard edge or soft edge, or really when you want to emphasize something. So let me show you the differentiation with bringing in a deep color, and again confidently moving it around. Let the knife do the actual work, and all you're doing is gliding your colors and your paint around the object. So again, you're creating not only just a movement of different direction, soft edges, hard edges. So again, this is a more confident way of applying your color. So once you begin to feel comfort with the application of the palette knife and paint on your canvas, you start to achieve this zen, peaceful inner frequency, and that eliminates the doubt and the question marks in your mind as you paint, and that will allow your confidence to come through. Having knowledge of technique is very important. Having knowledge of mixing color and tones and values is important. But that's almost nothing if you don't have your inner strength and your inner confidence to shape your strength on the canvas, to shape your joyful feelings on canvas. Because if you're plagued with doubt and you're plagued with uncertainty, that will show up on your art and within your art. And sometimes when you are painting subjects that require a lot more gentleness or depiction of softness and love, you want that to come through, not doubt and not any form of limiting and negative emotion. So that's why it's important to, quote unquote, shape your thoughts as you're shaping your physical artwork when you are painting. Now, in the past, I've spoken a lot about the different type of palette knives that are probably more efficient in painting. And of course, as many as there are different knives, there are different people that prefer different structures and shapes and so forth. But one of the most important things, no matter what shape you choose in terms of this tip up here, that's necessary, and that is to have a knife that's got this deep bend in the actual knife. And the reason for that, as I've spoken in many other videos relating to palette knives, is that when you paint and you hold it and you actually put that knife against the canvas, your hand won't get dirty. It won't touch the actual canvas. And that's important. If you have a palette knife that's got a straight arm up here, you will get into trouble very quickly and you will have your arm very dirty with paint. And I'm sure that you don't want to scrape as much off as what you would like to leave on. So consider the knife that you're using. It must have that kink. What shape you choose in terms of its format up here at the front, that's totally up to you and what makes you feel comfortable. Of course, the bigger the knife shape you go, the more paint you're going to use, and you'll find it a lot more difficult to paint smaller miniature artworks. The reason why I choose to have this one, and for those that have been watching my videos for a long time, this is my favorite. It's been with me for a very, very long time. I think at this point it's probably about 8 years. And you can see that it has a very big dent in it. And that's purely because I've used it so much and I've scraped with it so much. But this works for me because it's able to mold paint. It really does work like a brush for me. The flexibility on the tip up here is very important, and that's the other aspect that this allows me to then mold and move paint around. I do have larger sizes. That's, of course, to paint for bigger subjects and bigger canvases. But this particular one is probably that I go to most of the time. Another tip when you're painting with a palette knife is to understand the shape of the knife that you're using. And when you do have that connection with whatever shape you're using, you'll then begin to understand how to use the knife in its entirety. So whether it is that you only apply paint to the tip or to the entire side or to the full surface, this depends then on what you're actually wanting to achieve. For most of you that watch my videos, it seems like that when I use a knife, that when I actually paint, that I keep on dragging from a different section. So I pick it up, drag and hold and so forth. But in actual fact, my knife never leaves the canvas. I use a figure eight in terms of painting or blending each tonal value as I paint wet into wet on canvas. So as a result of that, I tend to therefore load my palette knife with only paint that probably is, as I can see there, just to the tip. So I don't load the full surface area of that knife. The only time that I'd probably load the whole surface area is if I'm painting a larger movement and larger motion. So that's the other thing to consider, that when you're painting with a knife, you use a lot more paint, but just like a brush, you need to understand how much you load it with paint. Also, the third tip is that every time you pick up a new tone, you must wipe your palette knife. Again, similar with the brush. Don't pick up a new tone while the old one is still on there. Otherwise, you'll muddy up everything that you've put on your canvas. So you want you want to have a mechanical focus when you paint, whereby you pick up a paint, you place it on, achieve your desired effect, wipe, new tone, paint it on, wipe, new tone. And so there's that mechanical process of painting, if you like, that gives you then the opportunity to stay clear and stay clear on your canvas. Very, very important. For me personally, I've learned after decades of perfecting the palette knife to really use as much as I need for what I'm focusing on. And I don't really go over the quote unquote allotment of how much paint I place on my palette knife. And so because I've, used it for so long, for so many decades, I really have it down pat in terms of dabs and dibs and add this and add that and how much to then use as I'm painting. I mean, that's come from experience of painting large paintings, middle size, smaller paintings. And so it really is a matter of practice. It's not something that I can tell you to do without you physically feeling and moving through the process and through the motion. But just be mindful of utilizing your palette knife to its capability. Don't go crazy with loading it with a lot of paint, and then you'll find that you've got such thick paint on your canvas that it becomes too wet, too oily to manage, too hard to maneuver, and then you have to eventually scrape it off. So these are little tidbits that are important, and whilst I can give them and convey them to you, ultimately practicing, doing, painting will give you a far more visceral connection to you being able to manage and or measure how much paint to start and paint with for the surface area that you're painting with. So remember, focus on those shapes and your movement before you're actually wanting to get to the end and rush to the end to complete a subject. This is one that I've done a while back, but I wanted to bring this back up again to just simply highlight that painting a very simple plum requires to have a variety of different color tones and values. So it's not just one that will go into it. There's a myriad of different tones that goes into just this one seemingly simple subject matter. And so what you'll need to really pay attention to, and this I cannot strongly emphasize, that when we paint, the biggest impediment isn't what happens on canvas, but rather what happens in our mind. Because the moment we give into negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative doubts, that we begin to chastise ourselves, you've already lost. And no matter how much you then focus here, this isn't clear, this process on canvas won't be clear. So start off small, use any object that you have in your household to learn how to move with the palette knife. And I've always advocated to firstly begin with simple fruit or vegetables that you've got in your pantry. Because again, remember, whilst they seem simple on surface and you think, oh, well, I don't want to do that. I want a big masterpiece. Perfecting movement and the palette knife and tonal values on something as simple as a plum will set you up for the bigger and better things down the road. That is one hard lesson that I had to learn many, many times, let me tell you. So just be mindful of, you cannot go on a bigger scale if you're not comfortable on small scale. Now, this is the two small demos that I did with a small brush and the palette knife. And this is from a walk that I went a couple of days or maybe a week ago now, by the way, Canberra at the moment is exceptionally cold, FYI. No one understands the hardship of Canberra until you live here in winter. But nonetheless, we went for a walk and it was quite a chilly and windy day, but the sunlight at one point burst through the clouds and absolutely highlighted the beauty of these gum trees. And I thought, wow, what a great way to now show this as a miniature and focus with the palette knife as a miniature. And what I wanted to give you guys here as a heads up, whilst I did the initial block-in with a paintbrush, ultimately I focused on then completing it with a palette knife. The reason why you would do any initial stage with a brush is purely to start to see the pieces of the puzzle come together, to get the values right, so you've got a foundation that you can compare your next value and your next value as you begin to paint. I have done small pochades, small miniatures with a direct palette knife, but really in this case, I wanted you guys to see the step-by-step process and then obviously become comfortable and familiar with utilizing a palette knife as you start to put the detail in. In one close-up, you'll actually see me go with the palette knife and refine the color tones and add a cool value in order to give a bit more of a curved structure to the trunk of the tree. Begin painting small pochades with nature, but as I've already emphasized, utilize a small subject matter from your pantry, like a fruit or vegetable, to get comfortable with that knife and with painting small paintings. Remember, this is more an exercise of getting your quote unquote shapes internally correct, that's your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, because once you remove those doubts, this here becomes very clear. You can't be intentional with working with the palette knife if you have fears of what it will look like on canvas. Thus, having clarity here, you'll have clarity on your canvas. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more art and my creative leadership insights. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time on the next creative video. Bye.